All right, welcome back. Let's talk about democracy. Let's talk about accountability. Let's talk about the states of our nation. And we're being joined on the program by the public affairs analyst, Mr. Bosun Fasolu, and also the director of programs, Yega Africa, Cynthia Mbamalu. Gentlemen and lady, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Good morning to you.
Good morning.
All right, Cynthia, let me start with you on this issue of accountability. In that sense, let's call it accountability crisis, because when we speak to a lot of people, whether it's policymakers or experts in that sense, one of the things people have always said, I'm happy you're also a lawyer, is that legislation is not in short supply. In fact, we're even enacting more. Acts of the National Assembly, we're trying to amend the Constitution. The detail is in the implementation. And now when people run foul of the law, accountability becomes a problem in that sense, to be able to say, you missed it, you messed up, you should be accountable for your bad behavior. I want you to speak broadly to the culture of accountability in Nigeria at the top level and among citizens.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm glad you used the term, the culture of accountability. And because at the foundational challenge of the major accountability crisis we have in Nigeria is the culture of impunity. And I say the culture of impunity because it's not just something that is within the government quarters alone. It is a culture within even we, the people of Nigeria. And so let's think about how every individual, the way we interact with each other, there is always that tendency for us to either want to take advantage of a situation, to put someone at a disadvantage and put ourselves at an advantage. There is also how we interact with institutions, with government properties. A lot of times you go to public institutions, you can see how the facilities, how the equipment are in a really bad state. And it's not because some of those things are low quality. It's mostly because the way we even deal with those materials are just very, you can't even explain. We treat them with so much laxity, lack of interest, lack of dedication to keep things and sustain things. So there is that culture where at every level of the society, we have a major gap of holding each other accountable. We have a major gap when it comes to individual accountability. So there is that at that level. But now let's look at the government institution, because at the end, you talked about the fact we have legislations and laws. Society is tailored based on how the leadership directs and drives the society. And so if at the level of leadership, there is a culture of impunity, it just makes it easier for the society to also imbibe that culture of impunity. So what have we seen over time? If you think about our institutions of government, let's start at the federal level. If we think about the National Assembly, I always begin with the National Assembly because we are in a democracy. And for me, the National Assembly, the legislative arm of government, so not just the national, even the state assembly, that is the hub of our democracy. That is the institution specifically designed to represent the people, to ensure that the excesses of the executive is checkmated, to ensure that that's by ensuring that there's proper oversight, and to ensure that we have the laws that we need to regulate us. But what we've seen over this 26 years of democracy, because we're turning 26 years this year, is that we still have a National Assembly that is yet to assert its position as an autonomous arm of government designed to hold the executive accountable, designed to ensure that there's proper oversight within the agencies of government. So the ministries, departments, and agencies, because that is the arm that oversights the executive arm of government. And so if you think about the fact that consistently we're yet to have an independent and autonomous arm of government that asserts itself in ensuring that accountability is a major requirement from the executive. And so that is a big problem. That is what we need to deal with, because if you have an arm of government, that the National Assembly, that is speaking truth to power, that is ensuring the executive delivers on its mandate, it makes it easier for the people to have a tool to use in demanding accountability. So that is one. The second is our federal agencies. Unfortunately, our history of military dictatorship has created a culture within our public institution that has remained a bit more dictatorial than democratic. And so what you have is public institutions that ordinarily do not believe that they owe any citizen answers. They don't believe they owe us accountability. And so they carry on the way they please. So if you get into any public institution and you make demand for information, there is almost the tendency that 9 out of 10 of these chances they would say no to the information that you want, or they will make a demand before they give you the information. And so if you think about the culture of the accountability crisis, like I said, it's enabled by a culture of impunity, but on a bigger scale is a question around weak institutions or institutions yet to assert their positions as oversight institutions, especially the National Assembly, and then the public institutions that believe that they do not owe us any information. And so when it comes to demanding information from those institutions, they are almost never willing to provide information that you need. And so we cannot achieve accountability if we do not have a responsive system.
Yeah, you've made a sticking point, and repeatedly also, about the National Assembly as it has to do with accountability. And that speaks to checks and balances, which is at the heart of any democracy, really. And that's the point that I'd like to follow up on. You know, Jeffrey was making a point earlier on about the party distribution that we now have at the National Assembly following these gale of defections that we have witnessed in the last month or so. We now have 68 APC senators. We have 30 PDP senators. And then all the other smaller parties are distributed either with 5, 1, I think 1 APGA senator. What does this mean for policies and legislations that may scale through and require the assent of the executive? And this is a period that we're talking about very critical electoral reforms that Nigerian youths are hoping will scale through ahead of the 2027 general elections. I'm bringing this to you, Mr. Fashilu, this time around. Mr. Fashilu, that's for you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you so much for that question. Of course, the defections, you know, to the ruling party, to me, I don't see this as a major challenge. What I feel is more challenging is the integrity of those who are defecting to the various parties. As long as we are together and we are doing the right thing, I think it should not matter whether you are in the ruling party or you are in the opposition party. The defection has been a little unsettling to so many people. And like I said earlier on, I don't see these as a threat to our democracy. As long as we identify integrity, as what is necessary for us to ensure that the various budgetary items which we've shared with Nigerians are sincerely implemented. Thank you so much.
Mr. Fashilu, I'm not just talking about defections. I'm talking about the party distribution. We now have more APC senators. What does this mean for policies and legislations that may require executive assent, particularly with the concern that the National Assembly is not as independent as we require it to be?
Thank you so much. The independence of the National Assembly, to me, is also what we should, be concerned about. I want to also believe that the National Assembly, as it is today, though the APC has a majority of, the members, like I said earlier on, if the members consider their integrity as very important, and of course, also understand that Nigerians are watching them, Nigerians are waiting for them to deliver on the dividends of democracy. It does not matter whether you are in APC, whether you are in APGA, whether you are in PDP, as long as you're doing the right thing. And then, of course, it is also very important for us to ensure that the various civic organizations who are doing their work, who are drawing attention to errors at the National Assembly, should continue to do this. And once Nigerians up and doing, once Nigerians are making necessary comments, once they are dedicated to examining the policies, and of course ensuring that these policies are well analyzed, I think this will put members of the National Assembly on their toe, and it will be difficult for very wrong decisions to be taken.
Well, let me take this back to Cynthia. And, this touches on really all the aspects of our lives as a nation. We can talk about security and how there needs to be better transparency. It's almost like transparency keeps getting elusive. The closer we get to it, the farther it becomes, right? So we've seen attacks now. We saw one last week in Goza, this week in Marte, for example, on military men and women. The latest, we had too much casualty. That's for Cynthia, by the way. And now we could talk about the politics of things, the National Assembly as well. How you always ask, is this the will of the people in that sense? Some of the defections that we've seen. One of the front pages has KB lawmakers defecting wholesale, dozen price, as they say. So is it really a system thing in that sense? Is it something that we have now been conditioned to accept? That, well, if they don't tell us, we're fine. If we don't know the truth, we're fine. We wait every 4 years, elect, rinse, and repeat. If anything will change, where will it start from? And I ask this deliberately. Will it start from a legislation? Would it start from a mindset? Would it start from government acknowledging and say, okay, we want to change now? Where will the change start from for you?
For me, I think it begins with the mindset. And I need to just state clearly that our democracy currently is in a dire situation. Where we are in a state where a lot of, I don't know if anyone exercises or if you have any level of fear at the state of our politics currently. These defections for me, it just raises a bigger question on the lack of political ideology. I just see a lot of these defections are just political rascality, if I'm being honest. Because when you have people elected on a particular party platform or party ticket, your voters elected you based on your candidacy on a particular platform. You get into office, and then midway, you're moving to another party. That in itself is a bigger question on how political parties, number one, are structured. Number two, on how politicians, how our political leaders see their roles in building a stable democracy. And number three, on the bigger question on values and principles. And it's only, see, this is a culture you see in Nigeria. So when you talk about the Senate, for instance, you now have about 68 senators. It's different if you had a party that these members won from the election, 68 members. This is midterm into an administration, you're having this defection. It's a bigger, honestly, I think this is a height of irresponsibility, and we need to begin to ask questions, to hold our leaders accountable. If you're elected on this platform, you need to remain there. You need to tell us that you believe in the party's ideology that you run on the platform, because it just means you stand for nothing. And you say when people stand for nothing, then they could go for anything, and that in itself is a bigger question. So when I connect it to the state of poverty, the state of insecurity, and then you ask about where is the problem? Is it about legislation? Is it about our mindset? For me, first is the mindset. We need to first accept that we truly want to be a democracy. If you do not have a mindset that is driven by democratic principles and values, you would not have a culture that is inspired by democratic principles and values. And so the mindset is key. The second around mindset is our mindset of accountability, to say that people are elected to respond to specific needs. For those who elected me, am I accountable to them? Am I reaching out and engaging them consistently? Am I speaking for them? Because if you don't have the mindset of service, if you don't have the mindset of true leadership, it's going to be difficult for you to even believe that you owe your people some measure of accountability. So that's one. But I'm also big on legislation. As a lawyer, I believe that the law is a tool of social engineering. With the law, it creates some level of legal mandate on how things ought to be organized. And so I know there are proposals already around electoral reform, there's actually a proposal on, to amend the constitution around cross-carpeting, because if you think about the sections limiting cross-carpeting, it makes a proviso, or has a proviso that creates some level of discretion on determining, because one of the proviso is provided that there is no internal crisis within the party. So when you talk about crisis, every political party in Nigeria has major crisis. The APC, the PDP, the Labour Party, they have their internal issues. And so it just makes it easy for people to say, oh, because there is internal, we have a ground to move to another party. So I think we need to strengthen that legislation, that particular section, to make it difficult for people to win election on one platform and then midway move to another platform. It just shows me you don't even know what you stand for. That for me in itself raises a bigger question on your leadership capacity and competency. And so that's one. The second part on it is, how do we ensure leadership is responding to our needs? The level of insecurity in Nigeria is not because we do not know what the solutions are. It's just because consistently we've elected people who are not willing to tackle this front on, and to call the institutions that have the responsibility to provide security to order. Every year, our security budget increases. I think 2025 budget, it had increased to almost 13% of the budget. Every year, we have an increase in the budget to security, but it has not changed our state of security in Nigeria. And so for me, the bigger question is, for our lawmakers in National Assembly, how are you ensuring that the budget for each year, when it comes to implementation, that your oversight is asking, this was the budget for this. Can we see what was purchased for this? Can we see what the procurement process was for this? How are the officers treated? What is your deployment plan? Why is intelligence failing us? Those questions are important, and we need to see our lawmakers on their toes working until we have some measure of control over their state of insecurity. Every geopolitical zone in Nigeria, from southeast, south, southwest, northwest, north central, northeast, has a major security challenge. And every year there is an increase in the budget. But who is asking the question? So for me, we need the legislation, but we need the mindset change.
Let's take it to Mr. Bosun. Mr. Bosun, we need your intervention as well, just like Cynthia said. So for some of us, we've thrown out the idea of ideologies for political parties. It doesn't exist. They have admitted to that as well. So it's not even a conversation. They may have their own personal ideology, but as a platform, I think it's one governor that was saying, what's the difference between the APC and the PDP? We've had conversations with them. We realize that, well, these are just political platforms to pursue their interests. So ideology is almost like we are just being ambitious at the end of the day. So I empathize with everybody like me who expects them to have ideology as political platforms, because you can't just move if you have those ideologies. But one of the things I want you to speak to when it comes to accountability, which is a big elephant in the room we may not have spoken to, is the issue of godfatherism. Because most of the time it looks like elected officials are more accountable to the people that bring them into office than even the people that elected them. So look at what is playing out in Rivers State. Look at what is playing out in Benue State. Look at what has played out in Lagos State before the president became president, and still president before he became president. Is being influential in making who becomes the governor of Lagos. I can go from state to state where godfatherism is a big deal. And as long as that exists at the level we practice it, it's going to be difficult for these officials to be accountable to the people. How do we navigate that part? The military had to create 2 political parties and told them, join any you like. But now we're not in a military administration, it's a democracy. Mr. Bosun.
Well, thank you once again for that question. For me, I think values as a society matters. Of course, as long as we see, as long as we play politics of money, politics of, ego, and then, of course, it becomes difficult for anybody who is contesting, a political position to actually win, based on his integrity. The society also has a role to play. Like Cynthia said earlier on, the mindset of everyone, during election, most people during election is what they want to get, from those who are contesting. And as long as you're mortgaging your future, as long as you're getting, rewards, for your loyalty, it becomes a little difficult for us to ensure that we put people who are completely responsible, who can fight our cause, in spite of all the odds. It becomes a little difficult, for us to have such people there. And so the nature of our society where we celebrate, money, makes it difficult for anybody, with integrity, but without that financial capacity to contest an election. It becomes very difficult. And so you look up to somebody who has been, who has been in the game, who has the structure. You remember, in the last election, we referred to a political, one of the presidential candidates. We said he did not have the required structure. And of course, you saw how difficult it was, for that political party and for that particular, presidential candidate to also, coordinate well, even though they tried. And so it's more difficult. As a society, we have to take responsibility and know that when we don't ask for money, when we don't demand for money, from those who are seeking, positions politically, we preserve our integrity, and it becomes, it's easier for us to also hold them accountable, to ask questions and take decisions, not based, on the fact that we've been giving money, but based on the fact that we sincerely voted for them. And when they are not doing what we require, when they are not doing what we desire, we will vote them out. And so that's very important. And like I said, it makes it a little difficult for us to separate godfatherism from sincere, politics, because they have the money, they have the resources, they have the people, they understand, most of the difficult, situations. They have the strategies because of the, huge amount of money they have. And then, of course, you refer to some of the cases we've had recently. See what is happening in Rivers, for instance. It's happened in Edo. Of course, it's happening, in some other states. And so it becomes very, very difficult because the godfathers have become so powerful. You remember the case of Ngige, when he was governor. The godfathers have become so powerful that they can make governance difficult for you because they have the money, they have the resources, they have the structure, they have the people. They know who to contact. They can create problems for you. And so we as a society, our mindset is very important. We have to take back our power. Once we are not able, because I always see this from the perspective of the people. It is going to be difficult for any good society. I mean, wonderful followers it's going to be difficult for a bad leader to survive in the midst of, good followership. It's going to be very difficult. So once we make up our mind and ensure that we play politics with integrity, we play politics, sincerely, without expecting gratification from the politicians, then we have taken back our power. And then, of course, we will begin to disconnect ourselves gradually from the politics of godfatherism. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. So, Cynthia, on a final note, and I want to end with your constituency, right? The chairman of INEC recently said, well, I'm still here. I have not gone anywhere, well, as this tenure winds down, though. And he promised a lot of electoral reforms. Now, we're midway to 2027. Some say it's maybe late in the day. But what are your expectations, really? And what is maybe one law that you expect, or one amendment or reform that must be passed if we want to solve some of these challenges, some of these issues as we wind down, Cynthia? If we can do that in 1 minute now.
One, I do believe it's not just in the INEC chairman's power, it's about the National Assembly. Yeah. We need them to hasten that process. We need to strengthen the provisions around electronic transmission of results, just so that we have that independent system that enables oversight of the results process. But we also need early voting for those that work on elections day, and diaspora voting for citizens outside Nigeria. And I think my last message is to Nigerians. Honestly, the power lies within us. The Constitution says sovereignty lies with the people through whom governmental powers are exercised. We have the Freedom of Information Act that we can use as a tool to make demands. But we also need to ensure that when it comes to elections, we're voting based on the issues and we are engaging the process differently and turning out in our numbers. At the end, our vigilance as a people is what would keep the system working. If we're not making demands and asking the right questions, we're going to have a system that no longer responds to our needs and basically just act as they wish to act. And at the end, like I said, it's honestly about how Nigerians are willing and able to work together to make the right demands on the system.
All right, Cynthia, quite an informative conversation in that sense. And we hope that the government agencies themselves understand that FOI is mandatory for them to respond to, just like you've alluded to at the beginning. Bosun Fasul is a public affairs analyst. Cynthia Mbamalu is the director of programs at Yaga Africa. Thank you so much for bringing your insights to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take a quick break now. When we come back, we'll move on to another leg of the conversation. Stay with us. We'll be right back.